We're going to take just a few minutes and introduce ourselves. I think we have a couple more panelists that are going to be joining us, so they'll pop in here when they can. But just want to thank you for joining us tonight. This is the third of a series of webinars that West Sound Youth for Christ is hosting for parents in the community on how to support your kids through COVID-19 and the crisis that we're all in right now. If you're not familiar with Youth for Christ, we work with kids throughout Kitsap and North Mason counties, serving them in the juvenile justice system, mentoring pregnant and parenting teen moms and dads, and then through after-school programs and youth centers throughout the community. So if you want more information on that, you can check out westsoundyfc.org. But I'd like to introduce those who we have here tonight that are going to be sharing a little bit. So I'm going to introduce Dan and Melissa. They are both counselors at Fairview Middle School in Central Kitsap. And Dan, why don't you start us off and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, my fourth year at Fairview, I worked at Olympic High School for about 30 years before I transferred to Fairview. I've got two grown kids in their 30s and 3 grandkids and 1 grandchild on the way. And yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Melissa, tell us a little bit about you.
This is my first year at Fairview, and before this, I was an elementary school counselor last year, and before that, I was an elementary school teacher in the Central Kitsap District for 9 years. I also have 3 children. I have a 17-year-old daughter who's in Running Start in a junior in high school. I have a 7th grade son at Ridgetop, and I have a 5th grade son at Brownsville. So I also have that parent perspective as we go through this as well, through this COVID-19 closure.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for being here, you guys. Bart, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Well, my name is Bart Lesko. I'm the campus life director for West Sound, which is Kitsap in North Mason County. I was also a teacher in Kitsap County for a year. My background was in teaching before I got into, I was a youth pastor and then working here for Youth for Christ. And so I've also got 4 kids, 1 elementary school, 2 middle school, and 1 high school student. So we've been, interestingly, we've both homeschooled and had our kids in public school. So it's been interesting this time in our lives trying to figure out what we were doing and what we are doing now and what we were doing before that. And so it's a little bit about myself.
Great. And my name is Phil Daubenspeck. I am the executive director at West Sound Youth for Christ. I am a dad of 3 girls, 22, 15, and 12. So 1 that's graduated and 1 that's in high school and 1 that's in middle school. So I come at this from the parenting side of it, but also a long history of working with middle and high school kids as well. So today we're just going to dive in a little bit and have some conversations about the elephant in the room, which is distance learning. And we're all we're thrown, for this, and found out in March that our kids were going to be going home from school a few weeks before spring break was supposed to hit. And I think all of us in the back of our head hoped that they would go back to school, but also kind of knew that if things went the way it was looking, that they probably weren't going to. And so just want to say, first of all, thank you to you guys as educators for the work that you have done to transition to distance learning literally in the course of a month. I think it's pretty amazing work that the schools and teachers have done to be able to do that. So just want to say that off the bat. But we did want to talk a little bit about how, as parents, we can support our kids in this learning environment. And so diving into that, we started off having some conversations last week, And I think that one of the ways that we could just start this conversation is by just talking about some of those elephants in the room right off the bat. So one of them is, I can share from my personal experience, is that I've gotten a lot of emails from teachers. They all have their own plans. They're all doing this thing, and I'm not used to that. I'm used to just getting a check-in from a teacher, every once in a while. Not a ton of details necessarily because they're kind of managing all that. But now I'm getting all these from 12 different teachers, 12 different classes for 2 different kids, different time schedules, different things they're looking for. And so that's just one thing off the top of my head that I've experienced, and I know that a lot of other parents have too. So Bart and each of you, I think maybe we can just share some of the things that we talked about this on Thursday last week, but what are some of those things that just have been, frustrations for us as we've kind of dove into this new thing? Anybody can go.
Well, and I could definitely start there. I had a teacher, friend of mine, that was over at our house the other day showing us how to work through Microsoft Teams, trying to open up a document. And he said, well, you just got to do this. And thought that we were having problems figuring out Teams. When he got into the whole setup, the whole program, he realized that the teacher hadn't actually set up this autofill document to actually be filled in, and found out that we weren't doing anything wrong. The teacher was still trying to figure out how to do that. And so I know a lot of the frustration on our end, on my end, is that we expected a lot of these systems to be dovetailed together, to be put together in a very concise fashion, to find out that a lot of the teachers were scrambling, and therefore, we would get emails on Monday morning, or we would get invitations to a Zoom call a couple hours before things were happening. And so we've had some of those frustrations here at home, and coming from someone that came out of the schools, I thought, well, I can see that happening, but it doesn't change the frustration as a parent of knowing that 4 kids, we're managing. Oh man, my wife was telling me that it's something like 13 or 15 different contacts, 19 different contacts, 19 different teachers, in order to manage this whole thing. So there's frustration there, and I think understanding on my part, but I get it. There's frustration from multiple perspectives, administrators, teachers, and parents, and kids too. So
I agree. With 3 different kids at 3 different levels, and all the teachers, and I hadn't done the math yet. Yeah, you're right. That's a lot of teachers that we're dealing with. And sometimes we get the Zoom invites 15, 20 minutes before they're going to be starting, and luckily I'm working from home and have my phone right next to me all day long, and I get that. But I just worry about the parents who are working, who are essential workers. For me, it's not a big deal, but because I'm home. But for those other families who don't have a parent at home 24 hours a day, those are the families that we really worry about, because how are those kids getting that information? And then also too, just the different forms of communication. Some teachers are using Google Classroom, some teachers are using Remind, some teachers are using email, and so it's just so many different formats to have to follow and make sure that you're getting all of the information.
That was a question I had for you parents. How independent are your kids versus how much do you need to be on top of them to guide them through this?
How much independent do my kids think they are, or how much independent are they actually?
Yeah.
They think they're super independent, but the reality is that if I'm not checking in on them, there's probably stuff getting missed for sure.
Yeah.
I just got a phone call. Actually, my 5th grader got a phone call today from his teacher saying, hey, why didn't you do any of your work last week? And I thought I was on top of everything as the parent, saying, yep, everything's done. And by golly, he didn't do any of his science work. So, and this is coming from a parent who's able to check and able to go on and look at the work. And I even missed it. So it's a lot.
It is. And I think that leads into, this conversation leads really well into probably one of the biggest topics that we can talk through tonight, which is just communication and how to communicate with teachers and counselors and that sort of thing at the school. And so I would just love to hear from you guys what that communication might look like for a parent who's maybe they're concerned or maybe they just don't know. Like where's the first place that a parent should start with communication?
Well, I think it's two things. One is to reach out to the teachers, but also, as I know people's time is limited and energy, but as best as you can, check out the school website, look at the newsletters, look at the the stuff the school's trying to communicate as best they can. Looking at the flyers and because I think it's sometimes the schools think, hey, we're sending all this information out, and I know it can be information overload, but if you're trying to start somewhere, I would say check the website, and there's probably some information right there about distance learning. And then, as we talked about before, emailing teachers with real basic, simple questions, like even that, where do I start? I want to help, not sure how, what should I do?
Yeah, that's great.
Well, from a parent's perspective, I learned very quickly to ask my kids, like, well, this hasn't happened yet. And the first question I learned about after about a day and a half is probably my wife. So when I say things tonight, it might be my wife learned it, but I'm representing our family here, so understand that. One of the things that I learned to ask students after a couple of days was my kids, was, have you emailed your teacher yet? And 9 times out of 10, they hadn't. And so I've been trying to encourage them to take the ownership and to have them send the email first, hoping that, and I've got one kid that will work the system, and I'm like, well, have you done this? And he's like, well, and he'll hem and haw, and they'll kind of work around the question, but making sure that they're taking ownership and asking them, have you emailed the teacher yet? And if they haven't gotten a response, then I will send an email. Or try to communicate in another way. But I'm trying to, with our 4 kids, sometimes I'll get 3 responses about, well, I haven't heard from a teacher. And I'm like, well, you email them. That way I'm not trying to manage 3 mails all at once. And so we've gotten pretty good from North Kitsap, and we've received pretty decent responses so far.
That's great.
I would also like to add to that, emailing teachers and asking what their office hours are. Like I know that our administration has asked all teachers to publish their office hours. So times that not only can a student be guaranteed that they can reach the teacher, but if I need to get on a Google Meet with my teacher because I don't understand something, is there a time in the week or a time every day that I can say, email, Mrs. Smith and say, hey, I don't understand this math problem. Is there any way we can get on a Google Meet in a half an hour? And, if I know that from 10 to noon every day, she's available to do that as a parent, then I know that I can encourage my child to make that email, like Bart was saying, write that email, send it, and get on there and actually work with the teacher one-on-one.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great.
Very good.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, Bart. Teaching your kids how to advocate for themselves, but you're right there, ready to support them if or they don't get a response. That's perfect.
Now that's all very idealistic, but the realities sometimes don't play out as well.
Yeah.
So let's say that you've worked with the teacher, you've reached out, you've emailed them, done all the things, and they're having a really hard time getting the work finished in the time allotted that is kind of been set out, which I think for middle schools is around 20 minutes and for high schools around 30 per class. What should you do to help your kids, your students that are kind of struggling to get stuff done in that time frame?
I've actually been working with several of our students at Fairview with this exact thing. They are just very overwhelmed with all of the emails and Google Meets and all the Google Classroom work. And so when there's a student that's doing that, what I usually do is I'll get a teacher or two on the line, and we'll all kind of put our brains together and work together to let the kid know, yes, it should be 20 minutes a day, maybe 25, 30 if you're in a high school credit class. However, if you're not getting it done, that's okay. Like right now, everyone's mental health is what's more important. It would be great, if every kid could get on there and finish the assignments in a timely manner, but that doesn't even happen when we're in regular, brick and mortar school. Right. So as long as you're trying, that's what we really want to make sure that parents understand and students understand, is that if you're putting in the time and it's not getting done, it's okay. You have tomorrow. Take a break, walk away if you're frustrated. Those are just really good strategies, even, when we're on a regular schedule. And Dan, I want to pass it over to you, because you had said something last Thursday that was just, it really rang true for our minds anyway. What you had mentioned.
Oh yeah, I think that was the comment they made about not worrying so much about passing or worrying about your grade, but instead be concerned about being engaged and being prepared to move on to the next grade level, because everyone's gonna move on to the next grade level. Yeah, I received a copy of an email today from a teacher and a parent asked a question of the teacher. Basically, my kid's not getting it done. My kid's not working very hard. I'm making him do it. I'm making him stay up late. I'm making him. And the teacher basically said, said, let's modify this. Instead of doing 5 of these items, just do 3 of them. Instead of doing 2 countries from South America, just do 1 country. So she was very quick to modify the work for that kid.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Bart.
I was just going to, I talked last week about one of the things that we learned early on. We have one of our sons has an IEP, and he's very diligent. He wants to make sure he's checking all the boxes all the time. And one of the things we finally had to tell him is, listen, at noon, you're done. We had to set a boundary for him because his diligence was great, but he simply was not going, because he's been put in the mainstream classes for several of his classes, and he's pass fail in those. And so we were not pass fail. Yeah, pass fail. So mostly we just said, listen, at noon you're done, because we see how diligent you are. We know that you want to learn, but we got to give a boundary so that you can have the rest of your day and you can be getting some time outside and just relaxing. And so the grace of being able to say, listen, your diligence, your engagement is definitely off the charts right now. Good job. Let's take a break at noon.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to that communication, even, like you were saying, that, Dan, that, that parent made that email, that call to that teacher to say, they're doing the work, we're pushing, it's not going well, but we're doing it, help us, and that, of course, that's, I think teachers are looking for that feedback to make sure that they can help the best way possible. So I think that's a great example of that. So awesome. So some other things that came up as we were talking, and this kind of also plays into it, but so I'm just going to ask this question, and then you might have the same response to the last one, but you might have a little different one. But let's say that you've got a student. There's tough students out there, and they're strong-willed kids, and they just flat out will not do the work. Like they just are like, for whatever reason, maybe they love English and PE, but science is not their deal, and they just, for whatever reason, they're not doing science. How can you help to engage, your student in that, and how can you help to bridge that between the student and the teacher in a situation like this? What are some tools you might be able to use?
Definitely, it makes it extra challenging trying to bridge that in the situation we're in. But I think trying to bring the teacher into it, to get the teacher to communicate with the student would be helpful, because it might relieve the power struggle that might be going on between the parent and the child, which hardly ever results in anything positive. And maybe taking a baseline too, if the student's not doing any science work, what can will the kid do 5 minutes, and then maybe a few days later do 10 minutes, kind of progressively work up. But yeah, maybe try to get a dialogue with the science teacher through a phone call or a Google Meet.
Yeah, and maybe in that phone call asking what kinds of strategies work in class. I know my youngest one especially will push back on me and make every excuse not to do the work, as a parent to his no science last week. But when his teacher asks him to do it at school, he doesn't want to disappoint her. So, what works, what is she doing that maybe I can pull out of my hat? And don't even be afraid to try bribery, like, well, if you get this done, then you can be on video games. There's nothing wrong with that. You gotta, whatever their payment is, whatever their carrot is, just use it. It's okay. A lot of parents don't want to do that, but it's okay to do it.
Yeah, I think that also just want to share, there was another gal who was part of our conversation on Thursday who's not able to be here right now, but she had shared that maybe this is an opportunity to take a non-traditional approach. I mean, this is all non-traditional right now. So, like, what does it look like to do math outside in the yard? Or, like just doing things in different places that maybe helps you to change your environment and rethink, learning in new and creative ways that you've never done before. So I think that's also maybe a tool that some parents could use in some scenarios. Did you want to say something, Bart?
Well, I was out in the green. I was out building something in our yard yesterday, and I asked my middle school son. I was like, "Well, in order for us to be able to figure out the pitch on this roof, we're going to have to use Pythagorean theorem." And he's like, "No, Dad, we're not doing that." He just kind of looked at me like, "This doesn't apply to real life." I'm like, "This is the one time it does." But anyway,
that's great.
Yeah, and since we are home, it is kind of handy to use the electronics and video games as reinforcers, because they're right there. So, maybe 15 minutes science work equals X amount of time on the video game, like Melissa was saying. It's right there.
Yeah.
And it's always good as a basic principle to follow at least preferred activity with a higher preferred activity, which would be video games. For the
sure, right. Yes.
Or playing with the dog.
I'm sorry, Dan, I interrupted you.
Go ahead.
What I've appreciated about what a lot of the teachers have done here in North Kitsap is they've changed their methodology to more of an extended project-based learning dynamics, which allows kids not only to be able to manage their time a little bit more, but it says, when this project is done, I'm done. Which I thought was really an interesting way, because I've found whenever I give my kids a task here at home, if I tell them they're going to work for a half an hour, I'm going to get not a whole lot of work out of them that half hour. But if they have a project that needs to get done, they manage their own time, and many times they can do that well. So this is just a shout out to a lot of those teachers that are using that method. I think that's great to be able to use that method to help kids learn how to manage their time, and to say, hey, you nailed this project by Tuesday. Guess what you got for the rest of the week? Free time, Yeah. So I think that's been really cool to see.
I know also something that has stuck out to my kids are like when their teachers have just also been pretty chill about this. You know, everybody's stressed out. It's different for everybody, but you know, one of my daughters was like, we were doing this check-in class, and she was telling us the story and explaining it to us, but she was making potatoes at the same time in her kitchen. You know, like it was just, you know, the teacher was just like, this is real life. I'm here with she has kids too, and you know, life is happening, but she's still doing it and in it with those kids, and they have talked about it for a week now. You know that, you know, this teacher did that. You know, and just how cool was that you were just in her house doing life with her. And I think, you know, this is one of those opportunities that I think the more and another example is like another teacher was like, hey, I've never really had to use Google Classroom before, so now I'm having to learn how to use it. So we're going to start to use all these features that I knew were there, but I never had to use it before because you were in my classroom all the time, you know. So I think for us as parents, to have grace with teachers as they're learning these things too, but also like for our kids to be able to see that like they have to adapt in their learning style, but we're also like as parents, we're having to adapt. As teachers, we're having to adapt, as everything's adapting right now. So we're all adapting in this together. We're all in this together. We're all making these shifts together. And so because we're doing that, how can you take advantage of that in a good way to learn something in a new way that you never would have done before? So it's also kind of a fun thing you can look at it.
Yeah,
Any other thoughts on that?
The way I put it with a teacher that I was in a conversation with was we're all in uncharted waters, all of us, every part of this. So we need to be forgiving of each other, you know, be gentle with each other and be understanding. And
Yep, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Melissa, you didn't say absolutely.
Absolutely. One of the teachers I spoke to, and I'm sure you've seen this on Facebook or, you know, around the internet, is we're all in the same storm, but we're just in different boats. So my boat looks different than your boat. You know, what I have going on at home is different than what you have going on at home. And so, you know, just having grace for everybody and remembering that teachers are doing their best, school staff is doing their best, parents are doing their best, kids are doing their best. And if we just go into every day knowing that, you know what, my kids, my students, my kids' teachers, they're all going to do their best. I'm going to do my best too. Then, you know, then I think that will help give everyone grace as we go through this.
Yeah. Yes. So this, I love this topic because I think exactly what we just kind of were talking about is a great segue into it. And I know I'm just going to share a little bit of my perspective here. I'm not a teacher. I work with teachers. I have a high respect for teachers and educators and what you guys do day in, day out, but it's not what I do. And so I think part of this for me as a parent who has kids, and now, you know, it was at first it was this term like, oh, everybody's getting homeschooled, and I was like, I'm not there. Like, I don't want to homeschool my kids right now. I don't have time and energy and capacity to do that. And then now it's been called distance learning, so it's all distance learning. But what are some things that we can just remind parents in this time of what their role is in this learning structure of distance learning? Because I think sometimes we can take on maybe too much of it onto ourselves because we want our kids to succeed. We want them to do the best they can. And so that could be, some of us maybe take too much on, and then some of us might take not enough on, right? We go the opposite way, like, you know, this is the school's job to do this. So what's a maybe some ways we could look at that as like, what is our role in this process as parents?
I don't know if this is just Central KidSat, but we've been told to take grades off Power School, so that to try to ease up the anxiety of being grade focused. And so I think that's a reminder to parents that it's not about grades, it's about engagement. And I guess the parent hat would be trying to be a guide by the side, not the sage on the stage, being a guide, guiding your student, which means sometimes, I suppose, letting go and letting the student deal with the teacher. Like Bart was saying, have the student engage with the teacher. Don't feel like you have to be in total control of what's going on.
I also think encouraging, I know I'm pretty type A, and so when my kids come to me every day before they can do any of their fun screen time, they need to check in with me and my husband and say, okay, this is what I did for math, this is what I did for this, and go down the list. And so sometimes, if they didn't do it exactly the way I wanted them to do it, it's like, okay, it's okay, and I just have to remember to just let that go and remember that this is just a temporary time. We're all going to get back into school and have those great teachers teaching our kids, and just encouraging, just making sure that they're doing just enough, their mental health is good, they're happy, and they're just being connected with the other students in their classrooms and their teachers, I think.
Well, the interesting thing for us in our house is kind of the management of boundaries. It is checking the time they're spending on screen, or not on screen necessarily, but engaged in what's the education pieces, checking the time that they're doing it, checking to make sure that they're engaging with their teacher. And so for us, it's just making sure that those certain checkpoints are being managed every day. And some homeschool systems allow for things like that, where there's a lot of the parents are only the accountability systems, and not necessarily the teacher, but the accountability, the guide, is what as Dan referred to. And so I think as long as we can continue to perceive ourselves as the ones that are checking in and making sure that these certain boxes are checked, and how we interpret those boxes being checked can be adjusted based on how kids are doing, that sort of thing. But just being willing to check in with them, like Melissa said, and making sure that we're covering the bases and making sure the kids stay engaged. I think that's the most important thing.
And as Bart was saying with his kids, when your kid does have trouble or reaches a dead end or has a frustration point and needs to get help from the teacher, advocating for your student. You're the adult. You know how to navigate the system probably better than your student does. And so when the student does need that help with advocacy, being there for them if you need to reach out to the teacher.
Yeah, I love the concept of coming side by side with those kids, like you said, Dan. I think that's great, and I think it takes the pressure off of us to feel like we have to teach. I've tried to let my kids know, I'm here to help, I'm here to support. Any questions you have, I want to help you. We'll figure it out. But if you want me to teach you something, I'm not sure how to do that, and so email your teacher or wait for a hangout classroom to ask that question, or put it on your list to make sure you're learning it. It's been a long time since I went to school, so you asked me a math question, you guys are doing math completely different than I did math, so ask your teacher. But if you get the concept and I can help you, I'll dive in and I'll help you as much as I can, come alongside you there. And I think it's a great way. Also, I love we did these webinars. This is our third one, as I mentioned before. And Sarah was one of the therapists that was on it, and she's homeschooled and sent kids to public school. And she just made a great statement, which said, this is absolutely not homeschooling. Like, at homeschooling, parents have complete control. They set the curriculum, they set the pace, they set everything else. This is distance learning. You're just there to keep your kids on the right path, and the teacher's job is to teach. So it's distance learning, not homeschooling, and just remember that, tell ourselves that it's okay. It's also okay if your kids don't do all the extra stuff that Instagram mom showed on her story. It's okay. It's okay that your kids didn't do that. You're still winning as a parent if your kids don't do that. I think it's great.
Also identifying somebody in the house that can help. So, my boys know I am not the one that they go to when they have pre-algebra questions. That's not me. That's my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter, or my husband. And so they know that they're not even going to come to me if they have, reading or social studies questions. I'm their person. But just identifying that person in the household, that if you have questions about this is who you should start with. If you can't get to your teacher, you can't get to a classmate, go to your brother, go to your sister, go to your dad. It doesn't always have to be, like you're beating your head against the wall if you don't understand what the math is.
Well, and to go along with that, first of all, I was a social studies teacher, and it's horrifying when my kids ask me a social studies question at home and I just shank it. I totally forgot. So they're like, "Dad, weren't you a social studies teacher?" So, but the idea, I think it was Melissa or Dan, I can't remember, that these kids are used to having networks of their own that they worked with when they're working in school, when they're in schools. Is there a way that you can be managing that home to allow them to be able to have that network in order to continue to do education the way that they were doing at school many times, is through their social networks, of working with their friends and finding out how they did on these certain things, that sort of thing, to have those resources at home, but also are they able to reach out to those resources that they had before to get the help that they need.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think kids are experts at social networking. And if they're having trouble in math, there's probably a student in their math class that knows how to do the work, and they put their heads together and figure it out.
And they already do that, even when school's in session. That's not new. So it might be new how they're doing it now, but I know my kids jump on FaceTime all the time to connect on homework stuff with their friends, even before all this stuff was going on. So when that came up as we were talking about it, that's exactly what I went to. Was like, oh my gosh, that is their biggest resource, is, besides their teacher obviously, is their peer group that's going through this together. And some of them are excelling in math and social studies, and some of them are excelling in English and science. And so reaching out to those peers that can come alongside and help each other out is a great resource that I think we tend to overlook as parents, because they're not professionals teaching our kids, but the reality is that they're doing the work just like we all are. So that's a great resource.
Well, as parents, I mean, for me anyway, if my kid asks me a question, I want to fix it. I just want to fix it for him. And so I'm too quick to dive in there and do it for him, where you can train yourself to step back and let them problem solve, not just how to fix or work on the problem, but also how to process the whole navigation of getting that answer.
Yeah, certainly. Talk about real life skills that we're learning right through this COVID stuff. This is it. This is it. So some kids have great support systems. Some kids don't. And so, what would you guys say if you are a parent and you know maybe one of your kids' friends is from one of those homes that doesn't have the best support educationally? What are some things? Of course, this depends on your capacity. If you're completely overwhelmed and stressed out, this may not be the right thing for you to do. But if you feel like you do have a little bit of space, and this might even help you in the mental health side of things to help somebody, what are some things you could do to help a kid that you're connected with that doesn't have that support at home?
being willing just to be a check-in person with them. Like if they need a daily check-in, like, 9:30, I'm going to get started on my work, and if you have the time, if you're working from home, set your alarm, check in with that kid at 9:30, even just a quick Zoom meeting or a Google Meet. And I can't remember the lady's name that was with us last Thursday, but she had a really great idea. If the teacher's planning a Google Meet at 11 o'clock, then let the friends know, like, hey, I'm going to be on the Zoom or the Google Meet with, my child at 11 o'clock. Why don't you do it with us? And then we can even talk afterwards and debrief about the lesson. So just inviting them and encouraging them to be involved with the classroom activities.
Yeah, just asking good questions, being somebody who's listening, I think is pretty key for those kids. There's lots of them that need just somebody just to reach out a little bit right now in these moments, for sure. So,
and from just a mental health standpoint, it's happened several times that we've heard of, and then also it's come to us as just not so much student centered, but just helping all of these people know that we're all struggling to resolve this. And so we've had a couple conversations with friends in which they're like, I'm done, and the meltdown happens, and then to realize that when they get done talking, that somebody on the other end's going, yeah, I understand, it's happening here too. And then what happens is it cycles, and then about 2 days later that person calls back and says, I'm done. Is just that mental health support of just being able to reach out to that person and help them to know that this whole thing is really uncomfortable for everyone, and you're going to reach a breaking point at some point. It could be bigger, it could be small, but just to let them know that when that happens, they can definitely call, and that they know that you're probably going to be calling them at some point.
yeah.
Just that mental health aspect of it it's not so much educational, but when those parents hit those points, to know they've got someone they can call to say, hey, listen, this is it. I'm done. The kids are going to be watching movies all day long today, and you're going to be saying, okay, because that's all you can handle today.
Yeah, my favorite meme is the guy sitting back saying, I'll allow it. Like that's you being the teacher, right? I'll allow it, because like at some point it's just like, yes, I'll allow it. Like, perfect. You're doing something great. We won today. We won. I love that.
Dan and I have actually texted each other that GIF before.
I bet you have. I bet. Oh man. That's great. Well, what I think, I've kind of exhausted through my list of stuff here to talk through, but wanted to open it up, and if there's anything that you want parents to know, and parents that are on here, if you have a question or something, you could send that to us through Q&A or through the chat box if you want to, if anything's come up. But for you guys on the panel, what are some things that you just want parents to know right now?
This is all going to blow over. I mean, it seems like we're going to be doing this for a really long time, but Friday is May, and we just need to get through May and half of June, and hopefully in the fall we're back to normal, and this is all going to be just a memory. And so just remember that your kid's mental health is more important than anything. It's more important than the math homework or the reading that needs to get done. They just need to be sleeping and just staying on a regular schedule. My kids, I notice all three of them are just so much happier and more productive. And I'm happier and more productive when we all, wake up at the same time, go to bed at the same time, when we just try to stay to our normal times of doing what we should be doing. But when it's all said and done, at the end of the day, just making sure that your kids are happy. Reaching out if you need help. School counselors are great resources. Friends, just reach out and don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it.
Look for the positive. You know, we got to remind ourselves that this is temporary. It's not going to be like this forever. Like Melissa said, this part of it's going to be over soon. School's out in June, so it is temporary. Look for the positive. Communicate with others. Reach out to others. And you know, the mental health of your kids, and also the relationship you have with your kids is paramount. Teachers aren't trying to overload you. They might be, but that's not their intent. Their intent is not to stress you out or overload you. They're trying to give meaningful activities to keep your kids engaged.
I would have two thoughts, and they sound like paradoxical, but I think it's both things are true. Is number one, to don't disengage and don't isolate yourselves. In the world that we live in today, I can't imagine how we could be surviving this without the digital realm that we have to rely on. So we don't have to isolate. We can't be giving hugs a whole lot right now outside of our own families, but we don't have to isolate ourselves. But also to be able to make sure that you are giving yourself the break and the rest, to be able to, if you have the capacity and if you have the ability to find time to step back and physically find the space, the time to be able to rest. Give yourself the grace to know that your kids aren't going to become uneducated because you decided to take a half hour for yourself. So I'd say don't isolate, but make sure that you're taking that time to relax and to give yourself the grace that you need to.
Yeah, those are all great pieces. I think this is a really unique time that we've been given to have our kids at home. You know, for some, it's probably the longest time we've been at home with our kids since they were like super little. And so I think I'm always like a firm believer that experiences teach people things. And so I think in the midst of this, giving your family unique experiences, you know, cooking together and going on a drive together, and parks are going to be open, it sounds like, in the next week or so. So, you know, maybe you take a day off of school and you go for a hike in the woods so that you can all get some fresh air. I mean, I think all those things, like, just take advantage of this time with your kids because it's precious. They're going to be gone before you know it. We're talking about high school, middle school kids here, so some of them are this is it. So, you know, take advantage of this unique opportunity of 2 months with your kids as much as you can, and then dive deep, and the school stuff will take care of itself as long as we communicate really well. So, well, thank you guys very much for joining us tonight, and appreciate your time. And this recording will be available. We'll shoot out an email to you guys, and we'll look forward to talking with you guys again. Thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.